Watch this video till the end and I'll be sharing something personal. If you want to hear about it, keep watching. Things I no longer believe about love. In this video, I want to share about my journey and experiences with understanding what love is. There's a lot of things I used to believe about love. I believe there was one perfect person out there for me. I believe that God had a specific soulmate for me, waiting somewhere, and he would bring us together eventually, like fate. I also believe that if I found the right person, everything would just fall into place. But after years of singleness, heartbreaks, disappointments, and searching scripture, I've realized that some of the things I believed about love was definitely not biblical. It was more cultural, habitual, things we learn in this world. And honestly, letting go of these false beliefs, it changed everything. So over the years, my view of love has changed dramatically. And it's not because I've become cynical, not because I stopped believing in love or that it would happen for me, someone to love me and someone to love back. It's because life has a way of exposing beliefs that don't survive reality. You know, some of the things I used to believe, it sounded amazing, it sounded beautiful, I was hopeful for it. It was just like a fairy tale, you know? But let me explain more in detail why they were not real. They're not biblical. And this one, some of you might disagree, and that's okay. You totally can disagree with me. I'm not teaching anything. I am sharing my experience and the wisdom I gained through experience in researching scripture. So I don't believe scripture teaches that there is one specific person out there for everyone. I know it doesn't teach that. Like, I don't believe there's a person on earth that God created exclusively for you or for me. Think about the pressure that would create. What if they lived in another country? What if they're married to someone else and you don't believe in remarriage? What if you miss them like a passerby? What if you make one wrong move and you ruin God's plans? I don't think that's how God operates. The soulmate concept, it sounds romantic, sure, but it oftentimes creates fear instead of freedom. The Bible never teaches that marriage is about discovering one magical person. Instead, scripture focuses on wisdom, character, compatibility, and commitment, like Isaac and Rebecca, Boaz and Ruth. None of these stories teaches the soulmate theology. They teach God's sovereignty, working through ordinary choices and faithful people. In Proverbs 19:14, it says, "Fathers can give their sons an inheritance of houses and wealth, but only the Lord can give an understanding wife." Notice it doesn't say the one and only soulmate. It points to God's providence. I also no longer believe that God has promised everyone marriage. Yeah, I used to believe everyone would get married. Everyone. Of course, I used to believe that. And the people that are not married were people that chose not to get married. So that was my train of thought a while ago. But yeah, if you've been single a very long time, like I have, you want certainty, right? You want promises in that aspect. You know, when someone tells you, "Don't worry, God definitely has someone for you." Really? Where does it say that in scripture? Show me, please. It doesn't say that. So how can someone say that? Don't worry, he's right around the corner. God has someone for you. But yeah, scripture never says that. God promises salvation. He promises his presence. He promises his faithfulness. But nowhere does he promise marriage for every believer. In fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7 that singleness can actually be a gift. It doesn't mean that marriage isn't good. It doesn't mean that singleness is bad. It just means that marriage isn't guaranteed. And honestly, I found more peace focusing on the real promises that God has provided in his word than demanding promises he has never made. Another thing I don't believe anymore is that love is primarily a feeling. The culture teaches us that love is something you fall into or fall out of, but scripture paints a different picture. Love is a decision. It's a commitment. It's an ongoing choice that we make on a day-to-day basis. It's not based on feelings. Of course, feelings do matter. Attraction matters, of course. I mean, the right kind of attraction, like that initial attraction, that's what matters. Not like the looking for the perfect man or perfect woman out there kind of attraction, but like there needs to be an initial attraction, just like a surface attraction, in my opinion. But all this to say, feelings was never designed to carry a marriage 50 years down the road, right? Whoever is listening and have been married for many, many years, you know. Feelings are not what's going to support your marriage throughout these struggles. Am I right? Some days you can wake up feeling deeply in love, and some days you're needing your space. But the question is, what will you choose? 1 Corinthians 13 describes love as patient, kind, not jealous, not proud, not self-seeking. Those are actions. They're not feelings. They're not emotions. Real love isn't sustained by chemistry or that initial attraction. It's sustained by commitment. So I also no longer believe relationships exist to complete me. I thought I would be completed once I became one with my husband. I thought that that was what was missing in my life, is that addition. My camera's acting up. It keeps going down and up, but stay with me. That was another lie I used to believe. Once I find the right person, I'll finally be happy, finally whole, finally complete, like two becoming one. But no human being was ever designed to carry that responsibility. Only Christ can do that. Colossians 2:10 says, so you also are complete through your union with Christ. How clear is that one? It's not through marriage. It's not through dating. It's not through loving someone else. It's not through another person. It's through Jesus Christ. A relationship can enrich your life. I don't deny that. But it was never meant to become your identity. I no longer believe that relationships are about what I can get. This one is the most important lesson of all for me. The world teaches us to ask, what am I getting out of this relationship? What are they going to do for me? How are they meeting my needs? But biblical love, it asks a different question. How can I serve? How can I sacrifice? How can I bless this person? Jesus modeled love through service. In Philippians 2:3-4, it says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Husbands and wives and people in relationships, are you doing that? Like, let's be honest, that's not how modern dating functions, right? The modern dating says, take, evaluate, consume, upgrade, move on. But biblical love says, serve, honor, remain faithful. That's a completely different mindset. Now I want to move towards what I actually believe about love. After everything I've experienced, and it's a lot of roller coaster ride of emotions in my past, I finally know and realize that God's love is much more reliable than man, any human being. I believe marriage is a gift, not a guarantee. I believe love is a choice long before it was ever a feeling. I don't deny that feelings can create the love that you have for your significant other, absolutely, but it's still a choice that we make in the beginning to commit to love, to grow with that person. It's a choice. For me, it's 100%, it starts with a choice. I believe healthy relationships are built on service rather than self-interest. That was big for me when I realized that in a relationship, you're in it to give, not to take. That was revolutionary. And I believe that if I never fully understand God's plan for my life, I can still trust his heart and his character and his promises, because his character is more dependable than my expectations, my desires. And that's a lesson that took me quite a while to learn. A very long time. But that was a very long time ago. Man, time flies. I ain't no spring chicken anymore. So here comes the point of sharing something personal. Now, before I share that thing with you, I want to be clear about something. This is not a story about being unable to move on. It's actually the opposite. So for many years, there was someone I genuinely thought would be the one. Our stories kept crossing paths throughout many different seasons of our lives. Literally 25 years worth of life crossing each other. For a long time, I interpreted that as evidence that God might have something to do in it, that maybe him and I were destined to be together. Today, I see it much differently. What changed wasn't the relationship between him and I, although that did change. What changed was my understanding of love, God's sovereignty, and the idea of soulmates. For nearly 25 years, there was that one person who occupied a unique place in my heart. So our path crossed many times. It separated, and crossed again over the years, on and off for 25 years. And I genuinely wondered, could that be him? The one person God intended for me all along? When we reconnected later in life, it felt almost poetic, like meant to be, like fate, like almost like all this waiting meant something, and that reunion was fate. And it all made sense in my head, or I tried to make sense of it all. I was desperate to make sense of this scenario, for sure. For so long, I thought That's the story God had written for me, and it's finally coming to pass. I looked at our history of that person and I kept saying, surely this isn't a coincidence. We have everything in common. Literally, he's the male version of who I am. We were best friends, and it was a connection that was almost nearly impossible to sever. But all this to say, eventually that relationship, friendship, it ended. And I was left with a choice. Either believe I had lost the person God created for me, or recognize that maybe my understanding of love was completely wrong. And I was living in this bubble of not reality, and that I was wrong. Because if one wrong decision, one failed relationship, or one closed door can permanently destroy God's plan for your life, then God's sovereignty isn't very sovereign. What that whole experience taught me with that guy is that God's will is much bigger than one person, bigger than one relationship or connection, bigger than one outcome. I still care about him for sure. We have a lot of history. I probably always will. But today I no longer believe that he was my soulmate. That was all in my head. That was all a lie of the enemy. I'm 100% convinced. I believe he was an important chapter in my life, in my story, but those things are not the same thing. And maybe that's why I can finally talk about this now, because there was a time when I thought if that relationship didn't work out, then I had missed my chance. I was that convinced. I thought that I was missing an important piece of the puzzle in my life by coming to conclusion that he's not my soulmate. And today I don't believe that anymore. I still don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever get married. I don't know if God has a specific plan that involves a specific person in my life. But I do know this. My hope is no longer resting in one person. My peace is no longer tied to any outcome. And my life is no longer on hold while I wait for love. That might not sound dramatic, but for me, that's called freedom. Realizing all of these truths and lies has brought me freedom. Maybe in next videos, I'll share a little bit more about that experience. I want to keep it basic and private as much as I can, although I'm very vulnerable and exposing everything in my life to you. That one, I want to remain a little bit more private. But yeah. And some of you might believe, oh, that's why she's still single. She's still hung up on that guy and she kept waiting for that guy. No, it's not true. It's not true. I'm just sharing that little piece of my life that had an impact towards what I believe now about soulmates, love, all that stuff. So that's the reason why I shared this. And no, it's not the reason why I'm still single. Okay. Anyways, thank you for listening. Let me know if you have something similar in your life that was holding you back from this truth about love, and let me know what you learned about love. And thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.